A nervous girl enters the clinic and discovers that the doctor who will see her is... The fluorescent lights of Magnolia Fashion buzzed overhead as Zariah Bennett straightened a rack of designer dresses, her slender fingers trailing over expensive fabric she could never afford. Her long braids, neatly styled and falling past her shoulders, swayed with each careful movement. The store had been quiet for the past hour, too quiet, leaving her alone with the persistent ache in her abdomen and thoughts she'd rather avoid. 5 minutes until closing, the intercom crackled, its artificial cheerfulness making her wince. Another day of missed sales targets. Another disappointed look from her supervisor tomorrow. Zariah pressed her hand against her stomach, trying to massage away the pain that had been her unwanted companion for weeks now. The touch made her flinch, and she quickly glanced around to ensure no one had noticed. The last thing she needed was concerned co-workers asking questions she couldn't answer. Moving toward the employee break room, she pulled her worn leather bag from her locker. Inside, nestled between her wallet and a collection of carefully preserved post-it notes covered in handwritten quotes, lay her current escape, a weathered copy of Pride and Prejudice. The spine was cracked in multiple places, each bend a testament to countless lunch breaks spent lost in its pages. "Girl, you're not seriously reading that ancient thing again?" Layla Carter's voice cut through the silence, making Zariah jump. Her best friend leaned against the doorframe, her platinum blonde lace wig catching the harsh overhead lights. The small diamond in her septum piercing glinted as she grinned, perfectly manicured nails drumming against her phone case. "Some of us prefer classic literature to TikTok drama," Zariah replied, but couldn't help returning the smile. Layla's presence always brought warmth to the sterile atmosphere of the mall. "Speaking of drama," Layla pushed off the doorframe and lowered her voice conspiratorially, "that fine piece of security guard just walked past again, 3rd time today." She wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. Zariah shook her head, unconsciously, wrapping a braid around her finger, a nervous habit she'd never managed to break. "Don't you have your own store to close?" "Already done, bestie. And don't change the subject. When are you going to let me set you up with my cousin's friend? He's got a good job, his own place." Layla's expression softened. "It's been 2 years since Marcus, Zariah. Not everyone's going to—" "Don't!" Zariah's voice was sharp enough to make Layla step back. The pain in her abdomen flared, as if responding to the mention of his name. "I'm sorry, I can't, not now." Layla reached out, squeezing her friend's shoulder. "I know, honey, I know." She paused, studying Zariah's face. "You're looking pale again. Have you eaten today?" "I'm fine." The lie came easily, practiced. Zariah had perfected the art of deflection, of pushing down pain until it became background noise. But lately the noise had grown too loud to ignore. "That's what you always say." Layla crossed her arms. "But I saw you holding your stomach earlier. Again, this isn't normal, Z. It's probably just stress." Zariah busied herself with gathering her things, avoiding her friend's concerned gaze. "The new sales quotas, you know how it is. Stress doesn't make you almost pass out in the stockroom." Layla pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. "My cousin works at Riverside Medical Center. They have a new patient program, sliding scale payments. I'm texting you the number right now." Zariah's phone buzzed in her pocket. She thought about the stack of bills waiting at home, of the rent due next week, of the dreams of owning her own bookstore that seemed to drift further away with each passing month. "Layla, I can't afford—" "You can't afford not to," Layla cut her off. "What happens if you collapse during your shift? You think Karen, the supervisor, is going to keep you on if you become a liability?" She made air quotes around the last word. The truth of Layla's words hit hard. Zariah's hand drifted to her stomach again, pressing gently against the persistent ache. She thought of the notebook hidden under her bed, filled with story fragments and character sketches, dreams, put on hold while she struggled just to stay afloat. "Fine," she whispered, more to herself than to Layla. "I'll call tomorrow." Layla's face lit up. "Promise?" "Promise." Zariah managed a small smile, even as anxiety churned in her gut. But right now, we need to leave before security starts doing their rounds. As they walked through the emptying mall, their footsteps echoing off polished floors, Zariah couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Maybe it was the pain, sharper now than it had been that morning. Maybe it was the way her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched her bag closer, the familiar weight of her book pressing against her side like a talisman. Outside, Atlanta's summer evening wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Zariah paused, taking a deep breath of the humid air. Above the mall's entrance, stars were just beginning to emerge, tiny pinpricks of light fighting through the city's glow. "Text me when you get home," Layla called as she headed toward her car. "And don't you dare ghost that doctor's office." Zariah waved, watching until her friend's taillights disappeared into the stream of traffic. Then, alone in the growing darkness, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Her hand pressed against her abdomen, fingers splaying wide as if they could somehow contain the pain that radiated outward. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she would make the call. Tomorrow she would face whatever this was, whatever change waited on the horizon. But for tonight, she had her books, her dreams, and the quiet company of her own thoughts. As she walked to her car, Zariah didn't notice the figure watching from the second-floor window of the medical center across the street. A tall man, in a white coat, rubbing his thumb against the face of an antique watch, unaware that his life was about to intersect with hers in ways neither of them could imagine. Riverside Medical Center's waiting room smelled of antiseptic and artificial lavender. Zariah sat rigidly in an uncomfortable plastic chair, her work name tag still pinned to her blouse. She'd scheduled the appointment during her lunch break, hoping to be back at Magnolia Fashion before anyone noticed her absence. Her fingers found their way to her braids, twisting one anxiously as she watched the wall clock tick past noon. The morning rush at the store had left her exhausted, and the pain in her abdomen seemed to pulse in time with her racing heart. Around her, other patients stared at phones or thumbed through dog-eared magazines, all avoiding eye contact in that peculiar way of strangers sharing space. "Miss Bennett?" The nurse's voice startled her. Zariah stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. As she followed the nurse down the sterile hallway, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was making a mistake. The medical bills would set her back months, maybe years. Maybe the pain would just go away on its own. "Right in here." The nurse gestured to an examination room. "Dr. Rhodes will be with you shortly." Alone in the small room, Zariah perched on the edge of the examination table, the paper covering crinkling beneath her. Her eyes wandered over the anatomical posters on the walls, the neat stack of pamphlets about various conditions, anything to avoid thinking about the growing knot of anxiety in her chest. A gentle knock preceded the door opening, and Zariah's carefully maintained composure faltered for a moment. Dr. Callan Rhodes stood in the doorway, tall and imposing in his white coat, yet something about his presence felt almost hesitant. His blue-gray eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch, though his expression remained professionally neutral. A neatly trimmed beard framed a face that seemed more suited to contemplation than small talk. "Miss Bennett?" His voice was soft, with an underlying warmth that seemed to fill the small room. "I'm Dr. Rhodes." Zariah nodded, unable to find her voice for a moment. She watched as he settled onto the rolling stool, noticing how he unconsciously rubbed his thumb across the face of an antique watch on his wrist. The gesture was oddly human, a crack in his professional veneer. "What brings you in today?" he asked, eyes scanning her chart before returning to her face with that same quiet intensity. "I've been having pain," Zariah began, then stopped, unsure how to describe the constant ache that had become her unwanted companion. "In my abdomen. For a few weeks now." Dr. Rhodes leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting from professional interest to something deeper. "Can you describe the pain for me?" As Zariah detailed her symptoms, she found herself sharing more than she'd intended. The almost fainting, spell at work, the sleepless nights, the way she'd been avoiding certain movements. Dr. Rhodes listened with complete attention, making notes but never breaking eye contact for long. "Have you experienced any similar symptoms before?" he asked, setting down his pen. "No, Zariah hesitated, then admitted, "I haven't seen a doctor in a while. The costs—" She trailed off, embarrassed. Something flickered across Dr. Rhodes's face, not pity but understanding. "We have programs that can help with that," he said quietly. "The important thing is that you're here now." He stood, and Zariah noticed how he seemed to fill the small room, not just physically but with a kind of contained energy. "I'd like to perform a basic examination, if that's all right." Zariah nodded, trying to ignore the way her heart rate picked up as he approached. His hands were warm through his latex gloves as he gently pressed against her abdomen, asking about pain levels. She winced at a particularly tender spot, and he immediately eased the pressure. "I'm sorry," he murmured, and something in his tone made her look up. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Zariah saw something vulnerable flash across his features, gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "There are several possibilities we need to rule out," Dr. Rhodes said, stepping back and removing his gloves. "I'd like to run some tests." He paused, rubbing his thumb across his watch again. "Are you available to do them today?" Zariah thought. Of the store, of Karen's disapproving frown, of the sales targets she was already struggling to meet. I should get back to work." "Ms. Bennett, Zariah," he said, and the use of her first name sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "I understand the pressures of work, but your health needs to be a priority." Something in his voice made her think he understood more than just work pressure. She found herself studying his face, noting the slight shadows under his eyes, the way his shoulders carried tension, even as he maintained his professional demeanor. "Okay," she agreed softly. "I'll stay." Relief flickered across his features. He began explaining the tests he wanted to run, his voice steady and reassuring. Zariah found herself relaxing slightly, drawn in by his careful explanations and gentle manner. As he wrote out the test orders, Zariah noticed a book peeking out of his coat pocket, a worn paperback with a familiar spine. "Is that The Great Gatsby?" she asked before she could stop herself. Dr. Rhodes looked up, surprised, then glanced down at his pocket. A slight flush colored his cheeks. "Ah, yes, I keep it for slow moments." "It's a beautiful book," Zariah said, thinking of her own collection of beloved novels. "Sad but beautiful. So we beat on, boats against the current," he quoted softly, then seemed to catch himself, clearing his throat. "The nurse will be in shortly to take you for the tests. Try not to worry. We'll figure this out." He stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Ms. Bennett, thank you for coming in today. It was brave." Before Zariah could respond, he was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of his cologne and the lingering warmth of his presence. She sat there, processing the encounter, until the nurse returned to escort her to radiology. Hours later, as she finally drove home in the gathering dusk, Zariah couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Rhodes's eyes, how they seemed to see past her careful defenses, past the smile she wore like armor. She thought about the book in his pocket, the antique watch he kept touching, the gentleness of his hands. Her phone buzzed with a text from Layla. How'd it go? Spill everything. Zariah started to type a response, then stopped. How could she explain what had happened today? How could she describe the way Dr. Rhodes had made her feel seen for the first time in years? How could she admit that, despite her best efforts to keep her walls up, something about him had slipped past her defenses? Instead, she simply wrote, "It went fine. Tests tomorrow." But as she pulled into her apartment complex, Zariah knew nothing was fine. Nothing was the same. And the strange flutter in her chest had nothing to do with her medical condition. In his office across town, Dr. Callan Rhodes sat at his desk, staring at the test orders he'd written for Zariah Bennett. His thumb moved absently across his grandfather's watch as he thought about her quiet strength, the way she'd noticed his book, the flash of literary understanding in her eyes. He'd broken his own rule today, using her first name, allowing a moment of unprofessional connection. He pulled The Great Gatsby from his pocket, but instead of opening it, he just held it, remembering the way she'd smiled when she recognized it. For the first time in years, the weight of his past felt a little lighter, and he wasn't sure what to do with that feeling. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Magnolia Fashion, casting long shadows across empty aisles. Zariah stood, in front of a mirror adjusting a display, but her mind was elsewhere, back in the sterile halls of Riverside Medical Center, where she'd spent most of yesterday afternoon. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another message from Dr. Rhodes' office confirming her follow-up appointment. 3 days of tests had yielded no clear answers, just more questions and a growing pile of medical terms she'd been researching late into the night. Earth to Zariah, Layla's voice cut through her thoughts. Her friend leaned against a rack of dresses, perfect eyebrows raised. That's the third time you fixed that same scarf. What's going on in that head of yours? Zariah smoothed the fabric one last time. Just thinking about the test results. Layla's expression was skeptical. And this has nothing to do with that fine doctor you mentioned, the one with the, what did you call them, storm cloud eyes? I never said that, Zariah protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. You didn't have to. I saw that look on your face when you were texting me about him. Layla's voice softened. It's okay to feel something, you know. Not everyone is going to be like Marcus. The name still stung, but less than before. Zariah touched her abdomen, where the pain had become a constant companion. Dr. Rhodes is just different. Professional. He actually listens. Professional, huh? Layla grinned. Is that why you're wearing your good perfume to a medical appointment? Before Zariah could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Karen, her supervisor, requesting an immediate meeting. The knot in her stomach tightened. Go, Layla said, noticing her friend's expression. I'll cover the floor. Karen's office was a testament to corporate minimalism, all sharp edges and motivational posters. The supervisor sat behind her desk, a sales report open on her computer. Zariah, your numbers for this quarter are concerning. Karen's voice was clipped. And these recent absences? They're medical appointments, Zariah explained, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I have documentation. That's not the point. Karen leaned forward. This is retail. We need reliability, consistency. If you can't provide that, the threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Zariah thought of her rent, her medical bills, the dream of her bookstore slipping further away. I understand. It won't happen again. By the time she left Karen's office, her hands were shaking. The pain in her abdomen had intensified, as if responding to her stress. She checked her watch, 2 hours until her appointment with Dr. Rhodes. The morning crawled by. Zariah helped customers mechanically, her mind drifting between Karen's warnings and the upcoming appointment. Finally, her lunch break arrived, and she hurried to her car. Riverside Medical Center looked different in the daylight, less intimidating, somehow. As Zariah walked through the automatic doors, she caught her reflection in the glass. She had worn her good perfume, she realized, with a mix of embarrassment and defiance. The waiting room was busier today. Zariah found an empty chair and pulled out her worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, but the words blurred on the page. Her phone buzzed with a text from Layla. Get it, girl, but also get better. Ms. Bennett? She looked up to find Dr. Rhodes himself standing in the doorway, not a nurse this time. He looked tired, she noticed, but his eyes brightened when they met hers. That same intensity was there, carefully contained behind professional distance. I thought we could discuss your results directly in my office, he said, as he led her down the hallway. His thumb brushed against his antique watch, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of tension. His office was unexpected. Warm woods and soft lighting, with medical texts sharing shelf space with classic literature. A worn leather armchair sat across from his desk, more comfortable than the usual examination room seating. "Please sit," he gestured to the chair. As she settled in, he moved to close the door but paused. "Would you prefer it open?" The consideration in the question made something flutter in her chest. "Closed is fine." Dr. Rhodes sat behind his desk, but instead of opening her file immediately, he studied her face. "How are you feeling today, truthfully?" The question, asked with such genuine concern, almost undid her. Zariah felt tears threatening and blinked them back. I'm tired," she admitted. "The pain is worse when I'm stressed, and today—" "What happened today?" His voice was soft, encouraging. Before she could stop herself, Zariah found herself telling him about Karen, about the sales targets, about the pressure of maintaining appearances while feeling like she was crumbling inside. Dr. Rhodes listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. "That's a heavy burden to carry alone," he said when she finished. His hands moved to the watch again, and for a moment he seemed lost in thought. Sometimes we push ourselves to maintain an image of strength, even when asking for help would be the stronger choice. Something in his tone made Zariah wonder if he was speaking from experience. "Is that why you came to Atlanta?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Surprise flickered across his features, followed by something darker. "What makes you ask that?" "Just the way you said it, like you understand." Zariah watched as he absently rubbed his thumb across the watch face. "That watch, it means something to you, doesn't it?" Dr. Rhodes looked down at the timepiece, as if seeing it anew. "It was my grandfather's. He taught me that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about seeing people, really seeing them." He cleared his throat, professional demeanor sliding back into place. "But we should discuss your test results." As he explained the findings, or lack thereof, Zariah found herself studying him. The way his shoulders carried tension, the careful precision of his movements, the moments when his professional mask slipped to reveal something vulnerable underneath. "I'd like to run one more series of tests," he said, writing on a prescription pad. "And I'm going to recommend some stress management techniques. The mind and body are more connected than we often realize." Their fingers brushed as he handed her the prescription, and for a moment, neither moved. The air seemed to thicken with unspoken words. "Thank you," Zariah said softly, breaking the spell, "for listening, for caring." "It's my job to care," he replied, but his eyes said something different. Later, in the parking lot, Zariah sat in her car holding the prescription. Dr. Rhodes's handwriting was neat, precise, just like him, but she kept thinking about the way his office smelled of old books and coffee, how his voice softened when he spoke about his grandfather. The moment. Their fingers touched. Her phone buzzed. Layla again. "Details, now!" But how could she explain that in 1 hour, sitting in a leather chair across from a man who collected both medical journals and classic literature? She'd felt more seen and understood than she had in years. In his office, Dr. Callan Rhodes stood at his window watching Zariah's car pull away. His thumb moved across his grandfather's watch, an unconscious gesture of anxiety. He should transfer her case to another doctor. It would be the professional thing to do, the safe thing. Instead, he found himself reaching for The Great Gatsby in his pocket, opening to a random page. They slipped briskly into an intimacy from which they never recovered. He closed the book quickly, but the words lingered, echoing with uncomfortable truth. The mall's food court buzzed with typical Saturday afternoon chaos, but Zariah barely noticed. She sat alone at a corner table, her untouched lunch growing cold as she stared at the medical bills spread before her. The numbers seemed to blur together, each total larger than the last. Her phone lit up with a notification, another appointment reminder from Riverside Medical Center. 5 visits in 2 weeks, each one adding to the mounting debt. But it wasn't the financial strain that made her heart race. It was the thought of seeing Dr. Rhodes again. "Girl, you look like you're about to have a breakdown." Layla appeared, dropping into the chair across from her. Today's wig was a stunning auburn, framing her concerned expression. "Talk to me." Zariah pushed the bills aside. "I'm fine." "That's what you said last time, right before you almost passed out in the stockroom." Layla reached across the table, taking her friend's hand. "Your hands are freezing. Have you eaten anything today?" Before Zariah could answer, a sharp pain shot through her abdomen. She gasped, doubling over, knocking her water bottle to the floor. The sound of it hitting the tiles seemed distant, drowned out by the rushing in her ears. "Zariah!" Layla's voice came from far away. "Someone call an ambulance!" "No!" Zariah managed through clenched teeth. "No ambulance! I can't afford—" "Shut up about money for once," Layla snapped, already dialing. "Wait, isn't your doctor's office in this mall?" Riverside Medical Center's urgent care entrance was mercifully close. Layla half-carried Zariah through the doors, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum. "My friend needs help," she announced to the startled receptionist. "Where's Dr. Rhodes?" "I don't need—" Zariah started to protest, but another wave of pain cut her off. "Dr. Rhodes is with a patient," the receptionist began, but a familiar voice interrupted. "I heard my name?" Dr. Rhodes emerged from a hallway, his expression shifting from professional inquiry to intense concern as he saw Zariah. "Get her into room 3 now." The next few minutes passed in a blur of movement and voices. Zariah found herself on an examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her as nurses took her vitals. Through it all, she was acutely aware of Dr. Rhodes's presence, his quiet authority as he gave orders, the gentle pressure of his hands as he examined her abdomen. "The pain is worse?" he asked, his blue-gray eyes searching her face. Zariah nodded, unable to speak. She watched as he rubbed his thumb across his grandfather's watch, thinking furiously. "I want an immediate ultrasound," he told a nurse. "And call Dr. Martinez in radiology. Tell her it's urgent." "I'll wait outside," Layla said, squeezing Zariah's hand before leaving. Alone with Dr. Rhodes, Zariah felt tears threatening. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to cause trouble." His expression softened. "Zariah." The use of her first name made her breath catch. "Your health isn't trouble, it's priority." She shook her head. "You don't understand the bills. I can barely make rent as it is. And my job—" Her voice broke. Dr. Rhodes pulled the rolling stool closer, sitting at eye level. "Tell me about your job, the real story." Maybe it was the pain or his gentle tone or the way he looked at her like she mattered, but Zariah found herself talking. She told him about Karen's increasing pressure, about the impossible sales targets, about working through lunch breaks just to stay afloat, about her dreams of owning a bookstore, now seeming further away than ever. "A bookstore?" Something flickered in his eyes. "What kind?" "Used books," she said, managing a small smile despite the pain. "With a coffee shop, somewhere people could feel safe, seen." Dr. Rhodes was quiet for a moment, his thumb moving across the watch face. "My grandfather had a library," he said finally. "Not public, private collection. I spent every summer there as a kid. He used to say books were like medicine for the soul." "What happened to it?" Zariah asked, noticing the past tense. "A shadow," crossed his features. "After he died, my father sold it, said medicine was about science, not stories." He stood abruptly. "The ultrasound team should be ready." The test itself was quick but thorough. Dr. Rhodes stayed nearby, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Zariah couldn't help noticing how the technician kept glancing between them, how Dr. Rhodes's professional mask seemed to slip whenever their eyes met. "I'd like to keep you for observation," he said afterward, helping her sit up. "Just for a few hours." "I can't miss work," Zariah protested. "Karen already—" "I'll write you a medical note." His voice was firm but gentle. And I'm referring you to a patient advocate about the bills. There are programs, assistance available. You don't have to carry this alone. Something in his tone made her look up. Dr. Rhodes stood close, too close for professional distance, and his eyes held an intensity that made her heart race for reasons unrelated to her condition. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. He seemed to struggle with the answer, his hand moving to the watch again. "Because—" he stopped, professional boundaries warring with something deeper. "Because you deserve to be helped, to be seen." The moment stretched between them, heavy, with unspoken words. Then a nurse knocked, breaking the spell, and Dr. Rhodes stepped back, his professional demeanor sliding back into place. "Rest," he ordered softly. "I'll check on you later." In the waiting room, Layla paced, her heels wearing a path in the carpet. When Dr. Rhodes emerged, she pounced. "Is she okay? What's wrong with her?" "We're running tests," he said, but something in his expression made Layla study him more closely. "You care about her," she said. It wasn't a question. Dr. Rhodes straightened, professional mask firmly in place. "I care about all my patients." "Mm-hmm." Layla's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "That's why you keep looking at her like she's a sunrise after a long night?" He didn't answer, but his hand moved to the antique watch on his wrist, thumb rubbing across its face in what Layla recognized as a nervous gesture. "She's special," Layla said softly, "but she's been hurt. Badly." "If you're not serious—" "I have patients to see," Dr. Rhodes cut her off, but his voice lacked conviction. He turned to leave, then paused. "Stay with her? She shouldn't be alone." Layla watched him walk away, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way he seemed to be carrying a weight far heavier than medical concern. "Oh, honey," she murmured to herself, "you're in deep trouble." In her observation room, Zariah lay still, one hand pressed to her abdomen. The pain had subsided to a dull ache, but her mind was racing. She thought about the way Dr. Rhodes had looked at her, about his grandfather's library, about all the things left unsaid between them. On her bedside table, her copy of Pride and Prejudice lay open to a random page. "In vain have I struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed." She closed the book quickly, but like Dr. Rhodes's touch, the words lingered on her skin, a promise or a warning of what was to come. 3 days after her collapse at the mall, Zariah stood in the empty Magnolia fashion stockroom, staring at the resignation letter in her hands. Karen's words from their morning meeting still rang in her ears. Final warning, unreliable, liability risk. Her phone buzzed. Dr. Rhodes's office. Her test results were ready. The message was standard, automated, but her heart still skipped at the thought of seeing him again. Since her emergency visit, something had shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. "You're really doing this?" Layla leaned against the stockroom doorframe, her expression concerned. Zariah folded the letter carefully. "I can't keep pretending I'm okay. Karen made it clear, one more incident and I'm fired anyway." "Then let her fire you," Layla argued. "At least you'd get unemployment." But Zariah shook her head. "I need to do this my way." She touched her abdomen where the pain had become a constant whisper. "Besides, I have my appointment with Dr. Dreamy." Layla's attempt at teasing fell flat when she saw her friend's expression. "Z, I saw how he looked at you that day. That wasn't just doctor-patient concern. It has to be," Zariah said quietly. "He's my doctor. Anything else would be..." "Would be what? Human?" Layla stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Girl, when was the last time you let yourself feel something real since Marcus—" "Don't!" Zariah's voice was sharp. "This isn't about him." But as she drove to Riverside Medical Center, Marcus's ghost rode with her. The memory of his betrayal, of discovering his other life, other family, still stung. She'd built her walls high after that, focusing on survival, on staying numb. Until... Dr. Rhodes. The medical center lobby was quiet today. Zariah checked in, then found a corner seat, pulling out her worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. She'd barely read a page when a familiar voice made her look up. "Miss Bennet?" Dr. Rhodes stood nearby, his expression unreadable. "Would you come with me?" She followed him, not to an exam room, but to his office. The warm wood and soft lighting felt intimate, almost dangerous. He closed the door, then turned to face her. "Your test results came back," he said, his voice carefully neutral, but his hand moved to his grandfather's watch, betraying his tension. "How bad is it?" Zariah asked, sinking into the leather chair across from his desk. Dr. Rhodes sat down, spreading several papers before him. "The good news is, it's not life-threatening. You have endometriosis, a condition where tissue similar to the uterine lining grows outside the uterus. It explains the pain, the fatigue." "And the bad news?" "It's chronic," he said gently. "Manageable with treatment, but not curable. You'll need ongoing care, possibly surgery." Zariah felt the room spin slightly. "I just quit my job," she whispered. "My insurance—" "There are options." Dr. Rhodes leaned forward, his professional distance cracking. "Zariah, look at me." She did, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "You're not alone in this," he said softly. "I've already spoken with our patient advocacy department. There are programs, foundations—" He stopped, seeing her expression. "What is it? Why do you care so much?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "This goes beyond professional concern, doesn't it?" Dr. Rhodes stood abruptly, moving to the window. His thumb worked across the watch face as he stared out at the Atlanta skyline. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, raw. 2 years ago, in Portland, I lost a patient, a young girl. I missed something. By the time I caught it, he pressed his forehead against the glass. I left everything behind. Came here thinking I could just be a doctor, nothing more. Keep my distance, be professional. What changed? Zariah asked softly, though she suspected she knew the answer. He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression took her breath away. You walked into my office, with your books, and your quiet strength, and your way of seeing past. Everything I try to hide behind. Dr. Rhodes, Callan, he corrected quietly. When we're here like this. I'm Callan. The use of his first name changed something in the air between them. Zariah stood, drawn toward him like a tide to shore. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know. His voice was rough. I should transfer your care to another doctor. It would be the proper thing to do. Is that what you want? Their eyes met, and in that moment, all pretense fell away. Callan took a step toward her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the flecks of grey in his blue eyes. What I want, he said carefully, hasn't mattered for a very long time. I've spent 2 years punishing myself, hiding behind protocols and procedures, but then you— He stopped, struggling for words. Then I what? Zariah's heart was pounding. You made me feel again, he admitted. Made me remember what my grandfather always said, that healing isn't just about medicine, it's about connection, about seeing someone's soul, not just their symptoms. Zariah felt tears threatening. I'm scared, she whispered. Not of the diagnosis, of this. Feeling something when I promised myself I never would again. Callan's hand moved toward her face, hovering just shy of touching. Tell me, he said softly. And she did. The words poured out. About Marcus, about the betrayal, about building. Walls so high she'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. Callan listened, his eyes never leaving her face until she ran out of words. I understand walls, he said finally. I built mine out of guilt and medical textbooks, but Zariah— His hand finally made contact, fingers brushing her cheek so. Gently it made her want to cry. Some walls need to fall. The moment stretched between them, electric with possibility. Then a knock at the door made them jump apart. Dr. Rhodes? A nurse's voice. Your next patient is ready. Reality crashed back. Callan stepped away, professional mask sliding into place, though his eyes still burned with everything left unsaid. "I'll have Dr. Martinez take over your care," he said, voice rough. "It's the right thing—" "No." Zaraya surprised herself with her firmness. "I trust you, as my doctor, and—" She paused, gathering courage. "And as whatever this is becoming." He studied her face for a long moment. "This won't be easy," he warned. "The condition, the treatment, the boundaries we'll have to maintain." "I know." Zaraya squared her shoulders. "But I'm tired of easy. Tired of safe. Tired of letting fear win." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Dinner," he said suddenly. "Not here. Not as doctor and patient. Just dinner. Would you—" "Yes," she answered before he could finish. "Yes." Later, in her car, Zaraya touched her cheek, where his fingers had been. Her phone lit up with a text from Layla. "How'd it go? You okay?" She stared at the screen, thinking about diagnoses and falling walls, about guilt and healing, about the way Callan had looked at her like she was a story he desperately wanted to read. "No," she typed back. "I'm not okay. I'm alive." Finally. Completely alive. In his office, Callan Rhodes held his grandfather's watch, reading the inscription he'd memorized years ago. "Time heals all wounds, but love heals the soul." For the first time since Portland, since the mistake that had driven him into exile, he felt something like hope. The small Italian restaurant was tucked away in a quiet corner of Atlanta, far from both the mall and the medical center. Zaraya sat at a corner table, fingers nervously smoothing the fabric of her navy blue dress. The candlelight caught the gold threads woven through her braids, a styling suggestion from Layla, who had spent 2 hours helping her prepare for this evening. "You're not just going on a date," Layla had insisted, carefully arranging each braid. "You're stepping into a new chapter of your life." Now, watching the door, Zaraya wondered if she was making a mistake. The past week had been a whirlwind, quitting her job, starting treatment for the endometriosis, and now this, dinner with Dr. Callan Rhodes. Not as her doctor, but as something else. Something undefined and thrilling and terrifying. The door opened, and her heart stopped. Callan stepped in, looking different without his white coat, more human somehow. He wore a charcoal grey suit that fit him perfectly, and his usual neat beard was freshly trimmed. His eyes found her immediately, and the intensity of his gaze made her forget to breathe. "I was afraid you might not come," he said softly as he reached the table. "I was afraid you might," she replied honestly. He smiled, a real smile, not the professional one she was used to, and sat down across from her. For a moment, neither spoke, both acutely aware of the shift in their dynamic. "This feels—" Callan began. "Surreal," Zaraya offered. I was going to say right," he said quietly, despite everything telling me it shouldn't. The waiter appeared with water and menus, giving them a moment to collect themselves. Zaraya watched as Callan's hand moved to his watch, the familiar nervous gesture somehow endearing outside the clinical setting. "How are you feeling?" he asked, then quickly added, "Not as your doctor, just as someone who cares." "Better," she said. "The new medication is helping, and not having Karen breathing down my neck probably helps too. Have you thought about what's next, after leaving Magnolia?" Zaraya traced the rim of her water glass. "Actually, yes. I've been looking into small business loans for the bookstore." Callan's eyes lit up. "Really? There's this space for rent in Little 5 Points. It needs work, but—" She pulled out her phone, showing him pictures of a worn storefront with big windows and exposed brick walls. "I can see it. Shelves along the walls, comfortable chairs, a coffee bar in the corner, where people can feel safe, seen." He echoed her words from their conversation in his office, making her blush. "Exactly." She put the phone away. It's probably just a dream, but dreams matter, he interrupted. They remind us we're more than our circumstances. He paused, then added softly, My grandfather taught me that. Tell me about him, Zariah said, the man behind the watch. Callan's thumb brushed the timepiece, but this time the gesture seemed more fond than anxious. Dr. William Rhodes, brilliant surgeon, terrible golfer, and the best man I've ever known. He believed medicine was as much about stories as science, that every patient was a novel waiting to be read if you just took the time to look deeper. Is that why you keep literature in your office? Partly, he smiled. It's also because some things can't be explained in medical terms. Sometimes you need poetry to understand pain, or fiction to make sense of reality. Their food arrived. Pasta for her, risotto for him, but neither seemed particularly focused on eating. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from books to dreams to deeper waters. After Marcus, Zariah found herself saying, I stopped writing, stopped believing in stories altogether. It felt safer to just exist. And now, Callan's voice was gentle. Now I'm starting to remember what it feels like to want more than safety. She met his eyes. Even if it's scary. I understand scary, he said quietly. After Portland, after losing that patient, I convinced myself that distance was the answer, that if I never let anyone get close again, I couldn't fail them. What changed? His eyes held hers. You know what changed. The candlelight flickered between them, casting shadows that seemed to dance with possibility. Outside, rain began to fall, creating a gentle percussion against the windows. This is complicated, Zariah said softly. You're still my doctor. For now. Callan leaned forward slightly. Dr. Martinez can take over your primary care. She's excellent, and she specializes in endometriosis cases. And then what? Then... He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Then we stop pretending this isn't exactly where we're supposed to be. The touch sent electricity through her skin. People will talk. Let them. His voice was firm. I've spent 2 years letting guilt and fear dictate my life. I'm done hiding. Zariah looked at their almost touching hands, at the way his fingers seemed to fit perfectly against hers. I haven't told Layla yet about transferring doctors. What did you tell her about tonight? A smile tugged at her lips. That I'm having dinner with a man who quotes Fitzgerald and keeps my favorite books in his office. And what did she say? That if you break my heart, she knows where you work. Callan laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I like her. She's a good friend. The best. Zariah paused. She said sometimes the biggest risks bring the biggest rewards. Smart woman. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Are you willing to risk it, Zariah? This complicated, messy, potentially beautiful thing? She thought about her old life. The careful walls, the measured steps, the dreams kept safely out of reach. Then she thought about how it felt to sit here with him, discussing books and hopes and fears, like old souls who had just found their way home. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Later, as they stood under the restaurant's awning watching the rain, neither seemed eager to end the evening. Zariah shivered slightly in the cool air, and without hesitation, Callan slipped off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. My car's just there, he said, pointing to a dark blue sedan. Let me drive you to yours. Such a gentleman, she teased, but her voice was soft. My grandfather would accept nothing less. They ran through the rain together, laughing like teenagers. At her car they paused, protected from the downpour by a large oak tree. Water dripped from its leaves, creating a private curtain around them. Zariah, Callan said quietly, reaching up to brush a raindrop from her cheek. I want to do this right. Take it slow. Make sure you have time to heal, to find your footing. But, she prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. But right. Now all I can think about is kissing you. Her heart thundered in her chest. What's stopping you? Ethics. Professional boundaries. The fact that technically for a few more days I'm still your doctor. Callan? Yes? Stop thinking like a doctor. He smiled, that real, unguarded smile that made her knees weak, and then his lips were on hers, soft and sure and tasting of possibility. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious, something rare, and she felt decades of fear and doubt melt away in the rain. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Callan rested his forehead against hers. "Well," he murmured, "I suppose that settles the question of transferring you to Dr. Martinez." Zariah laughed, the sound mixing with the rainfall. "I suppose it does." In her car later, still wearing his jacket, she touched her lips and smiled. Her phone lit up with a text from Layla. Details, now. But how could she explain that in one evening over pasta and candlelight? She'd rediscovered not just the possibility of love, but the courage to dream again. And in his car, Callan Rhodes held his grandfather's watch, reading the inscription one more time. But tonight, the words didn't feel like a reminder of past failures. They felt like a promise of future healing, for both of them. 2 weeks had passed since the rainy night kiss, and Zariah stood in the empty storefront in Little 5 Points, surrounded by dust motes dancing in the morning light. The exposed brick walls held decades of stories, and the large windows promised natural light perfect for reading corners. Despite its current state of disrepair, she could see the potential, just as she'd seen the potential in herself when she'd finally chosen to be brave. "You're really serious about this place, aren't you?" Layla walked through the space, her designer boots leaving prints in the dust. "It's going to need a lot of work." "I know." Zariah ran her hand along a worn wooden beam. "But look at these bones, the character. It just needs someone to believe in it." "Like someone believed in you?" Layla's knowing smile made Zariah blush. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Callan. "Busy day at the clinic, rain check on lunch, make it up to you with dinner?" Her heart did a small flip as she typed back, "Only if you bring that copy of Gatsby you're always carrying." His response came quickly. "Deal, 7 p.m. "You're glowing," Layla observed. "He's good for you." "He's—" Zariah paused, searching for words. "He sees me, really sees me." "And the transfer to Dr. Martinez, how's that going?" "Final paperwork today." Zariah touched her abdomen, where the pain had lessened under the new treatment plan. "It's strange not having him as my doctor anymore, but necessary." "For the kissing parts," Layla teased. "For all of it," Zariah admitted. "For having a real chance at whatever this is becoming." The real estate agent arrived then, clipboard in hand. As they discussed lease terms and renovation requirements, Zariah felt a familiar mix of excitement and terror. This was it, her dream taking physical form, with all its risks and possibilities. Later that afternoon, she walked into Riverside Medical Center for her appointment with Dr. Martinez. The familiar halls felt different now, charged with new meaning. As she passed Callan's office, the door opened and he stepped out. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the busy hallway fell away. He looked tired, a long surgery, she guessed, but his face softened when he saw her. "Miss Bennett," he said formally, aware of passing staff, but his eyes said something entirely different. "Dr. Rhodes," she replied, fighting a smile. Nurse hurried past, giving them a curious look, and they both remembered where they were. Callan's hand moved to his watch, a gesture she now found endearing rather than nervous. 7 o'clock, he said quietly. 7 o'clock, she confirmed, and continued to her appointment. Dr. Martinez was everything Callan had promised, knowledgeable, caring, and direct. But as she reviewed Zariah's treatment plan, something in her expression gave Zariah pause. "Is everything all right?" she asked. The doctor hesitated. "Your condition is responding well to treatment, but—" She pulled up some test results on her computer. "There's something we need to discuss, about future possibilities. Zariah's heart stuttered. What kind of possibilities? The extent of your endometriosis. It may impact your ability to have children. Not necessarily, but Dr. Martinez's voice was gentle. It's something you should be aware of, especially if you're in a relationship or planning. The words hit like physical blows. Zariah thought of Callan, of their careful steps toward something real, something lasting. Would this change things? Should she tell him? How? She left the medical center in a daze, barely noticing the Atlanta afternoon heat. Her phone buzzed. Layla, with news about potential small business loans. But Zariah couldn't focus. She drove to her favorite thinking spot, a small park overlooking the city. Sitting on a bench, she pulled out her worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, but the familiar words blurred before her eyes. The future she'd just begun to imagine, the bookstore, a life with Callan, maybe someday a family, suddenly felt precarious. I thought I might find you here. She looked up to find Callan standing nearby, still in his work clothes but without the white coat. He must have followed her from the medical center. How did you know? He sat beside her, careful to maintain a professional distance in the public space. You mentioned this place once, said it was where you came to write, to think. You remembered that. I remember everything you tell me. His voice was soft, including how your face looks when you're carrying something heavy alone. Tears threatened and she blinked them back. Dr. Martinez had some news. I know. At her surprised look, he added, not the details, doctor-patient confidentiality, but I saw the test markers when I transferred your care. Why didn't you say something? Because it wasn't my place anymore. As your doctor, or he paused, or as someone who's falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, both an admission and a question. Zariah's heart raced. I might not be able to have children, she whispered. The endometriosis. I know the possibilities. His hand found hers, propriety forgotten. And I don't care. How can you not care? It's huge. It changes everything. Does it? Callan turned to face her fully. Does it change how you light up when you talk about books? How you make me laugh for the first time in years? How you see past all my carefully constructed walls? But your family, don't you want? What I want, he interrupted gently, is you, however that looks, whatever that means. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. My grandfather used to say that families come in all forms, but love only comes in one, unconditional. A sob caught in her throat. I'm scared. Of what? Of hoping, of believing this could work, of... She gestured vaguely at the city below. All of it. Good, he smiled, because I'm terrified too. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. The evening breeze carried the scent of coming rain, like that first night they'd kissed. Zariah looked at their joined hands, at the way they fit together despite all the reasons they shouldn't. I put in an offer on the bookstore space, she said suddenly. His eyes lit up. Yeah? Yeah. It needs work. A lot of work. Like me. She managed a small smile. Like us. Then we'll work on it. All of it. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his worn copy of The Great Gatsby. Together? She nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. Callan opened the book to a random page and began to read softly, his voice carrying across the park as the sun set over Atlanta. Below them, the city lights began to twinkle. On each one a tiny beacon of hope in the gathering dusk. And somewhere in the distance thunder rolled. Not a warning this time, but a reminder of that first rainy night when they'd chosen to be brave together. Zariah leaned her head against his shoulder, letting his voice wash over her. The future was uncertain, full of challenges they'd have to face. But here, in this moment, with his grandfather's watch keeping time against her palm, and his words, painting pictures in the twilight, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. They stayed there until the first drops of rain began to fall, two souls finding shelter in each other's courage to dream again. The old storefront in Little, 5 Points buzzed with activity. Drop cloths covered the floor and the smell of fresh paint mingled with ancient dust. Zaria stood on a ladder, carefully painting the exposed brick wall a warm ivory, while Layla directed a pair of contractors installing bookshelves. "A little to the left," Layla called out, her platinum wig replaced with a practical bandana. "No, my left." Through the front windows, morning sunlight streamed in, catching the gold threads in Zariah's braids and the sparkle of hope in her eyes. The loan had come through last week, and with it, her dreams had begun taking physical form. Her phone chimed with a text from Callan. "Surgery running late. Still on for helping with the painting tonight." She smiled, typing back, "If you're not too tired, these walls won't paint themselves. Nothing could keep me away, not even Mrs. Peterson's gallbladder." A warmth that had nothing to do with physical exertion spread through her chest. In the month since their conversation in the park, since his quiet declaration of love despite her fears about the future, something had shifted between them. Their relationship had deepened, grown roots in the fertile soil of shared dreams and honest vulnerability. "Earth to Zariah," Layla's voice cut through her thoughts. "Girl, you're about to drip paint on those gorgeous hardwood floors we just restored." Zariah blinked, quickly catching the errant drop. "Sorry, got distracted." "Thinking about your doctor?" Layla wiggled her eyebrows. "The way you two look at each other should be illegal in at least 3 states. "He's not my doctor anymore," Zariah reminded her, but couldn't hide her smile. "No, he's just the man who looks at you like you hung the moon and stars." Layla's expression softened. "I haven't seen you this happy in years." Before Zariah could respond, the bell above the door chimed. A delivery man entered, carrying a large package. "Delivery for Zariah Bennett." She climbed down from the ladder, wiping her hands on her paint-stained jeans. The package was heavy, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. There was no return address. "Secret admirer." Layla peered over her shoulder as Zariah carefully unwrapped it. Inside was an antique brass lamp, its green glass shade slightly worn but beautiful. A note fell from the wrapping. "Every bookstore needs proper reading light. This one sat on my grandfather's desk for 40 years. Now it belongs where stories will find new life. See." Tears pricked at Zariah's eyes as she ran her fingers over the lamp's aged brass. She knew what this meant, this piece of his past, his grandfather's legacy, given to her dream. "Okay," Layla said quietly. "That man is officially too good to be true." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of painting and planning. By early afternoon, Zariah's arms ached, and her clothes were speckled with ivory paint, but the walls were beginning to transform. The contractors had finished installing the first set of bookshelves, their dark wood gleaming against the freshly painted brick. She was setting up Callan's lamp on what would become the reading nook when her phone buzzed. Dr. Martinez's office. Her heart skipped. The latest test results. "Hello? Miss Bennett? Dr. Martinez would like to see you this afternoon if possible. Regarding your recent tests." The familiar anxiety crept in, but it felt different now, less overwhelming. She wasn't facing it alone anymore. "I can come at 4. After ending the call, she texted Callan, "Appointment with Martinez at 4. Results." "Jarin?" His response was immediate. "Want me to come?" She hesitated, then typed, "Yes." At Riverside Medical Center, Zariah sat in Dr. Martinez's waiting room, trying not to fidget. When Callan arrived, still in his surgical scrubs, with his hair slightly disheveled, her heart did that familiar flip. "Hey," he said softly, sitting beside her. In public, they maintained professional distance, but his presence alone was comforting. Dr. Martinez's office was bright and modern, so different from Callan's warm, book-filled space. The doctor smiled as they entered, her expression giving nothing away. "Miss Bennett, Dr. Rhodes," she nodded to them both. "Please sit." Zariah felt Callan's quiet strength beside her as Dr. Martinez pulled up the test results. Under the desk, his hand found hers. "The treatment is working better than expected," Dr. Martinez began. "The inflammation has decreased significantly, and the pain should continue to improve." Relief flooded through Zariah. "And the other concerns?" "That's actually why I called you in." Dr. Martinez's smile widened slightly. "The damage isn't as extensive as we initially feared. With continued treatment and careful monitoring, there's no reason you couldn't have children in the future. If that's something you want." The words took a moment to sink in. Zariah felt Callan's hand tighten on hers, heard his sharp intake of breath. "Of course," Dr. Martinez continued, "we'll need to continue monitoring, and any future pregnancy would be considered high risk. But it's possible, more than possible." Later, in the medical center parking lot, the Atlanta sunset painting the sky in shades of hope, Zariah finally let the tears fall. Callan pulled her into his arms, professional boundaries forgotten. "You okay?" he murmured into her hair. "I didn't realize," she whispered against his chest. "I didn't realize how much I wanted the possibility until I thought it was gone." He pulled back slightly, brushing away her tears with gentle fingers. "Whatever possibilities come, whatever path this takes, I'm here, all in." Even if, he interrupted firmly. "Remember what I said? Unconditional." She reached up, touching his face where his beard was starting to show signs of gray. "I love you," she said simply. It was the first time she'd said the words out loud. His eyes softened, and she watched the walls around his heart, built from guilt and fear after Portland, crumble completely. "I love you too," he whispered. "Every complicated, beautiful piece of you." They drove separately to the bookstore, him still in scrubs, her in paint-stained clothes. The evening light filtered through the windows, catching the dust motes and making them dance like stars. Callan stood in the center of the space, taking it all in. "It's really happening," he said, wonder in his voice. "It is." Zariah showed him the shelves, the reading nook where his grandfather's lamp now sat. "Though I still need to figure out what to call it." He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Second chances." "What?" "The bookstore." He gestured around them. "That's what this is, isn't it? For the books, for you, for—" He touched his grandfather's watch. "For all of us." Zariah felt something settle in her chest, like the last piece of a puzzle clicking into place. "Second chances, books and coffee," she said, testing the words. "Perfect." He pulled her close, careful of the wet paint. "Just like you." They stayed there as evening fell, planning and dreaming. Callan insisted on helping paint despite his long surgery day, and soon his scrubs were as paint-spattered as her clothes. Near midnight, they sat on the floor of what would become the reading nook, sharing takeout Chinese food by the light of his grandfather's lamp. Outside, Atlanta hummed with nightlife, but in here they had created their own world, a world of books and healing, of second chances and first loves. "Tell me a story," Zariah said softly, leaning against him. Callan smiled, pulled out his ever-present copy of Gatsby, and began to read. His voice mixed with the city sounds, creating a melody of possibility. They were building something here, brick by brick, word by word. A bookstore, a relationship, a future, and like the books that would soon fill these shelves, their story was just beginning. The evening before Second Chances Books and Coffee's grand opening, Zariah stood amid towers of newly arrived books, breathing in their promise. The store had transformed from a dusty shell into something magical. Warm ivory walls, gleaming wooden shelves, and cozy reading nooks illuminated by Callan's grandfather's lamp. Her phone buzzed with a message from Layla. "Final decorations. Hard done. This place is going to blow people's minds tomorrow." Zariah smiled, looking at the hand-lettered quote Layla had painted above the main reading area. Every story deserves a second chance. Below it, smaller, in memory of Dr. William Rhodes. The tribute to Callan's grandfather had been Layla's idea. The man's lamp started this whole vibe, she'd insisted, plus it's romantic as hell. Another message came through, this one, from Callan. Emergency surgery, will be late tonight, don't wait up. Zariah's heart sank slightly, but she understood. They'd both been working endless hours, her preparing the store, him handling an increased patient load. Still, something in his recent texts felt different, distracted, like he was holding something back. The bell above the door chimed, and Dr. Martinez stepped in, looking around appreciatively. "This is incredible, Zariah. Dr. Martinez, I didn't expect—" "Please call me Elena." The doctor smiled warmly. "I'm not here officially. She hesitated. "I needed to talk to you about Callan." Something in her tone made Zariah's stomach tighten. "What about him? Have you noticed anything different lately in his behavior?" Zariah thought about his distracted texts, the late surgeries, the way he'd been rubbing his grandfather's watch more frequently. "He's been busy, we both have." Eleanor nodded slowly. "There's something you should know, something he probably won't tell you himself." She pulled an envelope from her bag. "This came to the hospital board last week from Portland." Zariah's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Inside was a letter, formal and cold. "Request Dr. Callan Rhodes's testimony in the pending malpractice suit regarding the death of Amy Mitchell, age 8. "The patient he lost," Zariah whispered. "The one that made him leave Portland." "He blamed himself," Elena said quietly. "The family's original lawsuit was dismissed, but they've reopened the case. They're claiming new evidence." "Does Callan—" "Dunno. He received his summons yesterday." Elena's eyes were sympathetic. "He has to return to Portland next week. Face it all again." The room seemed to spin slightly. Zariah sank into one of the reading chairs, her mind racing. This explained everything. His distraction, his silence, the weight he'd been carrying alone. Why didn't he tell me? "Because he's Callan," Eleanor said simply. "He handles pain by hiding it. Always has." She paused. "But he needs someone. Now, someone who sees past his walls." After Eleanor left, Zariah sat in the growing darkness, surrounded by books filled with stories of love and loss, of pain and redemption. Outside, Atlanta's evening traffic created a symphony of urban life, but inside she could hear only her heartbeat and the echo of unspoken fears. Her phone lit up, Callan again. "Surgery finished. Still at hospital. Need to review some files." She stared at the message, seeing now what he wasn't saying, hearing the pain behind the professional words. Without thinking too hard about it, she grabbed her keys and drove to Riverside Medical Center. The night shift staff knew her now, offered quiet nods as she made her way to Callan's office. The door was open slightly, warm light spilling into the darkened hallway. She found him at his desk, surrounded by open medical files. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled from running his fingers through it. The antique watch sat before him, its face reflecting the desk lamp's glow. "You should have told me," she said softly. He didn't look up, but his hand moved to the watch. That familiar, anxious gesture. "How did you find out?" Elena came to the store. Zariah stepped inside, closing the door. "The Portland case, the little girl." "Amy," he said quietly. "Her name was Amy." "Tell me about her." Now he did look up, his eyes haunted. "I can't. I haven't. Not since it happened. Try." She moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk. "Please." For a long moment, only the hum of the hospital's night rhythm filled the silence. Then slowly, like ice breaking in spring, words began to flow. "She loved butterflies," he said, his voice rough. "Had them painted on her hospital room walls. I promised her—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I promised her she'd see real ones when she got better." Zariah waited, her heart aching. "I missed something." In her blood work, a simple thing. By the time I caught it, his fingers traced the watch face. My grandfather always said healing was about seeing the whole story. I got focused on one chapter and missed the signs that... She reached out, covering his hand with hers. You were her doctor, Callan, not God. Try telling that to her parents. Bitterness crept into his voice. They lost their only child because I was too confident, too sure of my diagnosis to double-check. And you've been punishing yourself ever since. Wouldn't you? Yes, she said honestly. But I'd hoped someone would love me enough to help me stop. His eyes met hers, vulnerable and afraid in a way she'd never seen. I can't face them. Her parents, the board, the memories. You can't face them alone, she corrected gently. But you're not alone anymore. Zariah... He stood abruptly, pacing the small office. This could get ugly. If I lose the case, my license, my reputation, then we'll face that too. He stopped, staring at her. How can you be so sure? About us, about me? Because you taught me how. She stood, moving to him. You showed me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present, being real. Her hands framed his face. You've been carrying this guilt, this fear for so long. Let me help you set it down. I'm supposed to be strong, he whispered. Be the one who helps others. You are strong. And now it's your turn to be helped. She kissed him softly. I'm coming to Portland with you. The store, the opening, can wait. Layla can handle it. I can't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm telling. She smiled slightly. Someone once told me that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about seeing someone's soul. Tears filled his eyes as he recognized his grandfather's words. I'm scared, he admitted. Good, she echoed his words from months ago. Because I'm terrified too, but I'd rather face fear with you than safety without you. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet office, while outside, the city continued, its eternal dance of light and shadow. Finally, Callan pulled back slightly. There's something else you should know. He picked up his grandfather's watch, turning it over to reveal an inscription she'd never seen. Time heals all wounds, but love heals the soul. That's beautiful, she whispered. He gave it to me the day I graduated medical school. Said it would remind me that medicine isn't just science, it's humanity. His voice caught. I forgot that after Amy. Lost sight of everything except the fear of failing again. And now? He looked at her, really looked at her, with eyes full of love and trust and tentative hope. Now I'm ready to remember. With you. They left the hospital together, driving separate cars but heading toward the same future. At a red light, Zariah's phone lit up with a text from him. Thank you for seeing me. All of me. She smiled through tears, typing back, always. Tomorrow they would face the consequences of long-buried pain. They would board a plane to Portland, confront old ghosts, seek redemption or at least understanding. But tonight they had this, two hearts choosing to be brave together, two souls finding shelter in honest love. And maybe that was its own kind of healing. The butterfly garden at Portland Children's Hospital burst with color despite the autumn chill. Zariah stood among the late-blooming flowers, watching a monarch drift past on dark orange wings. Beside her, Callan's hand trembled slightly, in hers. She would have loved this, he said softly. 3 days of testimonies had ended yesterday, 3 days of medical records, expert witnesses, and painful memories. But it was Amy's mother's words that had changed everything. I don't blame you anymore, she'd said, tears streaming down her face as she faced Callan in the hospital boardroom. I've spent 2 years hating you, but you loved her too. I saw it in your notes, in the way you documented every little detail about her butterflies, her favorite books. Now standing in the garden Amy never got to see, Zariah felt the weight of the past week settling into something like peace. The case had been dismissed, not just on legal grounds, but through understanding, through forgiveness. "What are you thinking?" she asked Callan, watching his thumb trace the face of his grandfather's watch. "About healing," he said. "Real healing. The kind that goes deeper than medicine." He turned to face her. "I couldn't have done this without you." She smiled, reaching up to touch his face where new gray streaks had appeared in his beard. "I guess you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." His phone buzzed, a text from Elena back in Atlanta. "Store's been packed all week. Layla's handling it like a pro. When are you two coming home?" Home. The word held new meaning now. Home was Second Chance's Books and Coffee, with its ivory walls and carefully curated shelves. Home was the reading nook beneath Callan's grandfather's lamp. Home was wherever they faced life together. "Ready?" she asked softly. He nodded, taking one last look at the butterfly garden. "Ready." Their flight back to Atlanta left at sunset. As the plane rose above Portland's clouds, Zariah pulled out her worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, now filled with post-it notes in both their handwritings, shared thoughts, favorite quotes, pieces of their story written in the margins of another. "I've been thinking," Callan said, his voice thoughtful, "about the children's section at the store." "Oh? What if we added a butterfly mural and a medical corner, books about doctors, hospitals, healing? Help kids understand it's not all scary." Zariah's heart swelled. "Amy's Corner," she said. Softly, his eyes misted. "Yeah, a place where butterflies and books can help heal other little souls." They landed in Atlanta near midnight. The city glowed with its familiar warmth, welcoming them home. But instead of heading to their separate apartments, Callan drove them to Little 5 Points. "The store's closed," Zariah said, confused. He smiled mysteriously, pulling out a key. "I know." Inside, Second Chance's was transformed. Fairy lights twinkled among the bookshelves, and the scent of fresh coffee filled the air. Layla had clearly been busy. New pillows adorned the reading nooks, and fresh flowers sat in vintage vases throughout the store. But it was the new addition that took Zariah's breath away. Above the children's section, a stunning mural spread. Across the wall, butterflies in every color imaginable, dancing among painted bookshelves, and in the center, in elegant script, "Amy's Corner, where stories take flight." "Layla helped," Callan said quietly. "I sent her the design from Portland. Do you like it?" Tears blurred Zariah's vision. "It's perfect." He led her to the main reading nook, where his grandfather's lamp cast a warm glow. On the table beneath it sat a small velvet box. "Callan." Her heart stuttered. "Wait," he said softly. "Let me do this right." He took her hands in his, and she felt him trembling slightly. "6 months ago I was hiding from life, punishing myself for being human, for making mistakes. Then you walked into my office with your books and your quiet strength, and you taught me that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about building something new from the pieces." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "My grandfather's watch has been keeping time for 3 generations of doctors, but you taught me that the most important time is now. This moment, this chance to love completely, to live fully." Opening the box, he revealed not just a ring, but his grandfather's watch. "Marry me, Zariah. Help me keep building this story of second chances and first loves, of healing and hope. Be my partner in all of it. The bookstore, the medical practice, the butterfly gardens we'll plant in Amy's memory." "Yes," she whispered before he could finish. "Yes to all of it." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, a vintage piece, with tiny butterflies engraved in the band. As he fastened the watch on his wrist, she noticed a new inscription had been added below the original, "And love makes time stand still." Their kiss tasted of tears and joy and possibilities. When they finally parted, Zariah looked around at their shared dream, the books waiting to be discovered, the spaces waiting to be filled with readers and healing and life. "So what's our story?" she asked softly. "If this were a book on our shelves." Callan smiled, pulling her close. "It's about a doctor who forgot how to heal and a writer who forgot how to dream. About two broken people who found wholeness in each other's courage to try again." And the ending? A nervous girl enters the clinic and discovers that the doctor who will see her is... The fluorescent lights of Magnolia Fashion buzzed overhead as Zariah Bennett straightened a rack of designer dresses, her slender fingers trailing over expensive fabric she could never afford, her long braids, neatly styled and falling past her shoulders, swayed with each careful movement. The store had been quiet for the past hour, too quiet, leaving her alone with the persistent ache in her abdomen and thoughts she'd rather avoid. 5 minutes until closing, the intercom crackled, its artificial cheerfulness making her wince. Another day of missed sales targets. Another disappointed look from her supervisor tomorrow. Zariah pressed her hand against her stomach, trying to massage away the pain that had been her unwanted companion for weeks now. The touch made her flinch, and she quickly glanced around to ensure no one had noticed. The last thing she needed was concerned co-workers asking questions she couldn't answer. Moving toward the employee break room, she pulled her worn leather bag from her locker. Inside, nestled between her wallet and a collection of carefully preserved Post-it notes covered in handwritten quotes, lay her current escape, a weathered copy of Pride and Prejudice. The spine was cracked in multiple places, each bend a testament to countless lunch breaks spent lost in its pages. "Girl, you're not seriously reading that ancient thing again?" Layla Carter's voice cut through the silence, making Zariah jump. Her best friend leaned against the doorframe, her platinum blonde lace wig catching the harsh overhead lights. The small diamond in her septum piercing glinted as she grinned, perfectly manicured nails drumming against her phone case. "Some of us prefer classic literature to TikTok drama," Zariah replied, but couldn't help returning the smile. Layla's presence always brought warmth to the sterile atmosphere of the mall. "Speaking of drama," Layla pushed off the doorframe and lowered her voice conspiratorially, "that fine piece of security guard just walked past again, 3rd time today." She wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. Zariah shook her head, unconsciously, wrapping a braid around her finger, a nervous habit she'd never managed to break. "Don't you have your own store to close?" "Already done, bestie. And don't change the subject. When are you going to let me set you up with my cousin's friend? He's got a good job, his own place." Layla's expression softened. "It's been 2 years since Marcus, Zariah. Not everyone's going to—" "Don't!" Zariah's voice was sharp enough to make Layla step back. The pain in her abdomen flared, as if responding to the mention of his name. "I'm sorry, I can't, not now." Layla reached out, squeezing her friend's shoulder. "I know, honey, I know." She paused, studying Zariah's face. "You're looking pale again. Have you eaten today?" "I'm fine." The lie came easily, practiced. Zariah had perfected the art of deflection, of pushing down pain until it became background noise. But lately the noise had grown too loud to ignore. "That's what you always say." Layla crossed her arms. "But I saw you holding your stomach earlier. Again, this isn't normal, Z. It's probably just stress." Zariah busied herself with gathering her things, avoiding her friend's concerned gaze. "The new sales quotas, you know how it is. Stress doesn't make you almost pass out in the stockroom." Layla pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. "My cousin works at Riverside Medical Center. They have a new patient program, sliding scale payments. I'm texting you the number right now." Zariah's phone buzzed in her pocket. She thought about the stack of bills waiting at home, of the rent due next week, of the dreams of owning her own bookstore that seemed to drift further away with each passing month. "Layla, I can't afford—" "You can't afford not to," Layla cut her off. "What happens if you collapse during your shift? You think Karen, the supervisor, is going to keep you on if you become a liability?" She made air quotes around the last word. The truth of Layla's words hit hard. Zariah's hand drifted to her stomach again, pressing gently against the persistent ache. She thought of the notebook hidden under her bed, filled with story fragments and character sketches, dreams, put on hold while she struggled just to stay afloat. "Fine," she whispered, more to herself than to Layla. "I'll call tomorrow." Layla's face lit up. "Promise?" "Promise." Zariah managed a small smile, even as anxiety churned in her gut. "But right now, we need to leave before security starts doing their rounds." As they walked through the emptying mall, their footsteps echoing off polished floors, Zariah couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Maybe it was the pain, sharper now than it had been that morning. Maybe it was the way her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched her bag closer, the familiar weight of her book pressing against her side like a talisman. Outside, Atlanta's summer evening wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Zariah paused, taking a deep breath of the humid air. Above the mall's entrance, stars were just beginning to emerge, tiny pinpricks of light fighting through the city's glow. "Text me when you get home," Layla called as she headed toward her car. "And don't you dare ghost that doctor's office." Zariah waved, watching until her friend's taillights disappeared into the stream of traffic. Then, alone in the growing darkness, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Her hand pressed against her abdomen, fingers splaying wide as if they could somehow contain the pain that radiated outward. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she would make the call. Tomorrow she would face whatever this was, whatever change waited on the horizon. But for tonight, she had her books, her dreams, and the quiet company of her own thoughts. As she walked to her car, Zariah didn't notice the figure watching from the second-floor window of the medical center across the street. A tall man, in a white coat, rubbing his thumb against the face of an antique watch, unaware that his